Picture this. Philadelphia, January 6, 1996. Families were returning from holiday celebrations, cars filling parking lots across the city. Children pressed their faces against windows, watching the first gentle flakes begin to fall. They could not have known that within 48 hours, those same parking lots would become white graveyards. Cars would vanish so completely that spring would arrive before they were found again. Recently discovered weather data reveals this storm defied every prediction, creating snowdrifts that swallowed civilization whole. This was the blizzard of 1996, the white hurricane that made an entire city disappear. January 6, 1996, started like any winter weekend across the eastern seaboard. Post-holiday shoppers crowded malls from Boston to Washington. Office workers planned their Monday commutes. Weather forecasters mentioned snow, 6 to 12 inches, manageable for cities that knew winter. What they could not see was a meteorological monster forming over the Atlantic. Two massive storm systems were about to collide, creating what scientists now call a perfect storm scenario. The jet stream had locked into an unusual pattern, trapping Arctic air over the continent while pulling tropical moisture northward at unprecedented speed. The National Weather Service had initially predicted a modest snowfall. Local meteorologists cautioned residents to prepare for winter conditions, but there was no sense of impending catastrophe. Philadelphia, a city well-versed in winter weather management, activated its standard snow response protocols. Salt trucks were loaded, plows stood ready. The city believed it was prepared. What was not apparent was that the developing storm system was feeding off unusually warm Atlantic waters. Ocean temperatures in January 1996 were recorded at 3 to 4 degrees above normal, providing extraordinary fuel for the developing low-pressure system. Meanwhile, an Arctic high-pressure system had descended from Canada, creating the perfect collision point over the mid-Atlantic region. By late afternoon on January 6th, meteorologists at the Mount Holly Weather Service office began to realize the gravity of what was developing. Barometric pressure readings were dropping at rates typically seen in tropical systems. Weather models, primitive by today's standards, struggled to calculate the potential snowfall totals. Emergency management officials, working with limited information, could not fathom the scale of what was about to hit. Saturday, January 6th, 4 p.m. Light snow began falling across Philadelphia. Families finished weekend errands, parking cars in lots that would soon become archaeological sites. A woman named Margaret Jenkins was shopping at Franklin Mills Mall with her 3 children. She parked her blue Honda Civic in Row G, Section 12. She would not see that car again until April. "I remember telling my kids to enjoy the snow," Margaret later told the Philadelphia Inquirer. "It was pretty, coming down in big flakes. We even stopped to catch some on our tongues before heading into the mall." By 8 p.m., snow was intensifying rapidly. What forecasters predicted as 6 inches became 12, then 18, with no signs of stopping. The Philadelphia Electric Company reported the first power outages as heavy snow brought down tree limbs across suburban power lines. Road conditions deteriorated at an alarming rate. Pendo T-plows, deployed in standard formation, could not keep pace with accumulation rates approaching 3 inches per hour. Sunday, January 7th, 2 a.m. The storm reached peak intensity. Winds of 50-plus miles per hour created horizontal snow walls. Visibility dropped to 0 across the entire region. The National Weather Service recorded sustained winds of 45 miles per hour, with gusts exceeding 60 miles per hour, hurricane-force conditions in a blizzard. Robert Mendez was working the night shift at Philadelphia International Airport. He watched through terminal windows as planes disappeared under white mountains. He later recalled for a Weather Channel documentary. "It was like watching the world get erased. One minute, you could see a Boeing 747 on the tarmac. The next, it was just a white lump. Then even the lump vanished." By 6 a.m. on Sunday, emergency services began receiving calls about missing vehicles. Parking lots at shopping centers, airports, and downtown areas had become featureless white plains. The 911 dispatch center logged over 400 calls in a single hour from residents reporting their cars stolen, when in reality, they were simply buried where they had been parked. As dawn broke, though few could tell given the whiteout conditions, Philadelphia found itself in an unrecognizable landscape. The Benjamin Franklin Parkway, normally defined by its distinct lanes and central divide, had become a continuous white field. Independence Mall, home to some of America's most precious historical landmarks, disappeared under snowdrifts that reached second-story windows. On Sunday, January 7th, at 12 p.m., Philadelphia officially recorded 30.7 inches of snow, the deepest in city history. But the raw numbers do not tell the full story. The extraordinary winds created drifts that transformed the urban landscape beyond recognition. At Franklin Mills Mall, snow drifts reached 15 feet high. Security cameras captured the moment the last car antenna disappeared beneath the white surface. Mall security chief Vincent Romano described it as watching the parking lot get erased by a white eraser. Downtown Philadelphia became unrecognizable. Broad Street, normally bustling with traffic, looked like an Arctic tundra. Parking meters vanished completely. Street signs became buried landmarks. Police officer James Barrett attempted to patrol Center City on foot. He said he walked down streets he had driven for 20 years and could not tell where he was. Everything was gone. Cars, mailboxes, fire hydrants. All of it buried so deep you would never know a city existed there. He gave that account to KYW Radio in a 1996 interview. The Pennsylvania National Guard deployed Humvees, the only vehicles capable of navigating the transformed city. Lieutenant Colonel Margaret Wilson said she had served in Alaska and Antarctica, and this was worse. In those places, you expect emptiness. In Philadelphia, seeing skyscrapers rising from what looked like the Arctic was surreal. At Philadelphia International Airport, more than 400 vehicles in long-term parking disappeared completely. The lot became a white desert with no reference points. Airport Director Thomas Collins later admitted they had no plan for such an event. He recalled asking, "How do you find cars when you cannot even find the rows?" and that crews were looking at satellite photos to guess where the cars might be. Emergency dispatcher Sarah Rodriguez fielded hundreds of calls. People were calling asking us to find their cars. And how do you explain that you cannot find entire parking lots? One man insisted his car was stolen because there was no way snow could completely cover an SUV. She had to explain that crews were finding snowdrifts taller than houses. The storm's ferocity created phenomena rarely seen in urban environments. Wind-carved snow caves around building entrances. Snow cornices, overhanging edges created by wind deposition, formed on rooftops, creating avalanche hazards in downtown Philadelphia. One such avalanche crashed through the glass atrium of the Gallery Mall, producing what a witness described as a winter waterfall of snow. Monday, January 8th. The storm finally moved out to sea, leaving behind a transformed landscape. Philadelphia deployed every available snowplow, but the equipment was overwhelmed by both the volume and density of the snow. The city's 450 plows and salt trucks, normally sufficient for winter operations, could not handle drifts that exceeded their height clearance. The National Guard arrived with military vehicles, the only machines capable of moving through 6-foot drifts on city streets. White Rescue, as it was unofficially called, brought 200 guardsmen with specialized equipment to help locate buried vehicles and clear critical infrastructure. At shopping centers across the region, managers faced an impossible task. How do you clear parking lots when you cannot tell where the cars are? Franklin Mills Mall manager Tom Braddock recalls, "We had 2,000 parking spaces. After the storm, we had a white field. No cars, no lines, no reference points. It was like the lot had never existed." Mall management developed an improvised solution. Workers with long metal poles walked in grid patterns, probing the snow until they hit something solid. Each hit was marked with a flag, creating a bizarre landscape of colorful markers rising from the white expanse. The economic impact reached $3 billion across the region, not just from snow removal, but from the complete shutdown of commerce for a week. Philadelphia's business district remained effectively closed until January 12th, with many suburban areas taking even longer to recover. Insurance companies faced unprecedented claims. Thousands of vehicles suffered damage from the weight of snow and ice. Some cars were not found until spring thaw revealed crushed roofs and shattered windows. State Farm Insurance reported over 12,000 claims from the Philadelphia region alone, making it the costliest winter weather event in their history at that time. Mayor Ed Rendell declared an emergency that lasted 8 days. The city budget for snow removal, $6 million for the entire winter, was exhausted in just 4 days of round-the-clock operations. Eventually, federal disaster funds covered some of the extraordinary costs, but many small businesses never recovered from the extended closure. Margaret Jenkins, the mother from Franklin Mills, spent 3 months taking buses to work. When her Honda was finally excavated in April, the roof had collapsed from the weight of the snow. The insurance adjuster thought I was joking when I said my car had been missing for 3 months, she recalled. Then he saw the photos of them digging it out. It looked like an archaeological excavation. Airport worker Robert Mendez kept a photo on his desk of the buried parking lot. My kids did not believe me when I told them cars could just disappear. I had to show them proof. The storm created countless stories of hardship and resilience. Philadelphia General Hospital nurse Elena Vasquez walked 7 miles through waist-deep snow to reach her shift. She explained that patients do not stop needing care because there is snow. She stayed at the hospital for 4 days straight before relief staff could reach the facility. For many residents, the blizzard created their first experience with true isolation in an urban environment. Center City resident Jamal Washington described the eerie silence. He said Philadelphia is never quiet. But that Sunday night, with no cars, no buses, not even the sound of footsteps, it was like being in another world. You could hear the snow falling, just the soft sound of flakes landing on more flakes. The storm exposed both vulnerabilities and strengths in the city's fabric. In wealthier neighborhoods, private contractors brought in specialized equipment to clear streets days before city plows arrived. In contrast, some low-income areas waited more than 2 weeks for comprehensive snow removal. This disparity prompted a formal review of the city's emergency response protocols. Yet amid the hardship, communities demonstrated remarkable solidarity. In Fishtown, neighbors organized a communal snow tunnel through drifts that had blocked East Girard Avenue. Using nothing but shovels and determination, residents created a passage that allowed essential workers to reach their jobs. In South Philadelphia, a group of teenagers spent the week digging out elderly neighbors' cars for free. One later said it needed doing. That is what you do. Communities that had been strangers became families during the dig-out. Block parties formed around shared shoveling efforts. Strangers shared hot coffee and stories of where they had parked their buried vehicles. Local radio station WMMR became a lifeline for isolated residents. Disc jockeys Pierre Robert and John DeBella stayed on air around the clock, broadcasting emergency information and connecting listeners who needed help with those offering assistance. When official channels were overwhelmed, the radio station became an impromptu disaster management center. 28 years later, the blizzard of 1996 remains the benchmark for winter storms in the Northeast. Every major snowfall gets compared to that January weekend when cars disappeared. Weather forecasting improved dramatically after 1996. The storm's unexpected intensity led to better computer models and earlier warning systems. The National Weather Service invested millions in enhanced Doppler radar systems and more sophisticated modeling software. Today, a storm of similar magnitude would likely be predicted with much greater accuracy days in advance. Philadelphia completely revamped its snow emergency protocols. The city increased its fleet of specialized snow handling equipment and created an emergency vehicle storage plan that moves municipal vehicles to elevated structures during major snow events. Parking garages are now designated as emergency snow parking locations, with reduced rates during storms to encourage people to move vehicles off streets. The Philadelphia Office of Emergency Management, created partly in response to the 1996 blizzard, now conducts annual winter preparedness drills. Their disaster response plan specifically includes protocols for whiteout conditions with exceptional drift formation, language directly inspired by the 1996 event. Insurance companies developed new categories of claims processing specifically for disappearing vehicle scenarios. State Farm's Buried Vehicle Protocol includes guidelines for locating, documenting, and properly excavating snow-entombed cars to minimize secondary damage during recovery. For ordinary citizens, the blizzard created lasting habits. Hardware stores across the region report spikes in snow shovel sales whenever forecasts mention the possibility of significant snow. Retailers call it the 1996 effect. Margaret Jenkins still parks in the same section at Franklin Mills, now Philadelphia mills. She takes a photo of her car's location every winter. She says, "You never know when the world might decide to disappear again." The urban legend of snow cars, vehicles discovered only during spring thaw, persists in Philadelphia culture. Each winter, social media fills with stories from the blizzard of 1996, when the first flakes fall. The collective memory of the storm has become part of the city's identity. Perhaps most importantly, the blizzard reminded a modern city of its vulnerability to natural forces. Despite all our technology and infrastructure, 30 inches of snow falling at the right angle can still make civilization vanish. It humbled meteorologists, city planners, and ordinary citizens alike. The parking lots were cleared. The cars were found. Life returned to normal. But somewhere in Philadelphia, in garages and driveways across the city, people keep extra shovels, extra salt, extra supplies. They learn that winter can still surprise us, that the modern world is more fragile than it appears, and that sometimes the only thing that saves us is each other. Did you experience the blizzard of 1996? Were you one of the thousands who lost their car under those massive snowdrifts? Share your story in the comments below. The Tornado Attacks community wants to hear your personal account of this historic storm. Subscribe now and hit that notification bell so you do not miss our upcoming deep dives into other weather events that changed America forever. Together, we are preserving the forgotten history of nature's most powerful moments.